This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, commonlawyer.com. We're at question 142 of the Catechism, Stansbury's Catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Question 142, which says this. How many powers of Congress are there? It says not many. This is the answer, not many. But Congress has the power to make all laws for a certain district, not more than 10 miles square, where Congress meets and where the chief officers of the government reside. This is called the seat of our national government. The seat of the government of the United States, a sovereign government with absolute power over 10 miles square. That's what our Constitution says. What is that area? Not over 10 miles square. As a matter of fact, it is 10 miles square. And that area is, we call it today, Washington, District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. The Congress of the United States is sovereign in the District of Columbia. The government of the United States is not sovereign in your state. No. Sovereign in the District of Columbia. Sovereign on military bases, of course. Naval dockyards and army bases, they're sovereign within there. The United States government is sovereign within a federal courthouse. That's their jurisdiction. Sovereign in there. But they're not sovereign in your state. No, sir. We call it federalism, is the arrangement of power and authority between the individual sovereign states and the sovereign United States. Why did they do that? Well, it's seldom ever said. Why did they say we want this 10 square mile place for the seat of the government of the United States? And I'm going to use an analogy. But before I use the analogy, I want to remind you, some of you went to our class on Christian nationalism, and we went to great lengths in that class trying to discover what it was. Is it real? Does it work? All those kinds of things. What countries are Christian countries in the world? And there are some officially Christian countries, England being one of them. In South America, there are Catholic countries. I find it of great note that countries in South America don't call themselves Christian. They call themselves Catholic. Why? Well, because they're not Christian. That's why. They don't identify as Christian. Now, in America, the Protestantism has been such a powerful force here that the Roman Church here, they don't call themselves strictly Catholics. Oh, they'll call themselves that, but they'll also call themselves Christian because they want to identify with Christianity, which is Protestantism. I know there are many out there that are saying, Brent, that's not accurate. I'm a Roman Catholic. You're not going to pull my leg. I'll debate you anytime. You know, people, as somebody said the other day, I had found a YouTube video. It's on YouTube, and it's me, and I'd forgotten I'd done this, and the title of it is something like, Who Are the Jews? Something like that. And so I just go through history and say, well, here's who they are, and I talk about how the Jews are not a race of men, they're a religion. Anybody can join it. You want to become Jew? Just join the religion. You know, whatever they tell you to do, you can do that. People have been doing it for centuries. When people say they're a Jew, that doesn't mean they're an Israelite. It may not. Doubtful. Nobody knows who the Israelites are. Well, I said all those kind of things. And I went to the Bible to show it. The Bible lays all this out and how the proselytes, how the Jewish religion, Jesus Christ said, travel all over the world and make proselytes. Not a matter of race. It's not a matter of a certain tribe of people, or it's a matter of religion. Well, somebody, boy, they were hotter than a Saturday night pistol. As Mom says, hotter than an old wet hen. I poured water on hens, and I've seen hens out in the rain. I never saw them all that mad. I don't know where that came from. And we got a lot of analogies about chickens in our country. Did you know that there are more chickens, Of all the birds in the world, there are more chickens than any other kind of bird. I know you have a hard time believing that. It's true. And the number of chickens in the world has doubled since 1990, maybe tripled. That's some astronomical amount because, well, here's the way it works out, friends. Those of you that are agriculturally management minded, it takes 3 pounds. We used to do this and figure this kind of stuff. It takes 3 pounds of corn to produce 1 pound of pork. You want to, well, that's not accurate because pork's just the meat. But if you feed a hog 3 pounds of corn, he'll gain on average 1 pound on his body. Sell a hog like that on the hoof, so much a pound. That's the way the farmers sell their livestock, on the hoof, by the head. 3 pounds of corn, give you 1 pound of gain. That's pretty good. Now, if you're raising cattle and you're feeding them on feed, now I'm not talking about grazing them, but you're feeding them on corn, which is what happens in the end. After they take them off the udder, then they feed them out and sell them. Feed them grain and marble the meat, make it unhealthy, but it tastes great. 7 pounds of corn. Well, in general, 7 pounds of feed. You could mix it with ground wheat, sorghum, mix all sorts of stuff up in the feed. Gluten. People that feed cattle buy gluten by the ton. I had a neighbor who used to buy it by the ton. They'd take it out of the grain mills. They didn't want it. Everything's gluten-free now. You say, everything's gluten-free. You can read it on the package. You say, well, where's all that gluten going? Well, they're not losing money on that. They're making more money on the gluten now than they were before. They're selling it for good money to men that feed out cattle. And if you're eating that meat, you're getting the same trash. Well, I eat gluten-free. Well, it'd pay to ask the farmers what's going on sometimes. They'll give you you listen to these left-wing wackos that are selling health food, they'll pull your leg. Now, I don't want to eat that stuff either, but I'm trying to find ways to know I don't, no sense eating it. Corn syrup's hard on a fella. If you haven't got anything else, corn syrup and gluten, that's hard on a fella. You want to know what causes cancer? It's not like it's a mystery. It's those oils and that corn syrup that hang in your body and don't get kicked out easy, and they irritate cells in your body, every cell. Corn syrup, sunflower oil, safflower oil, canola oil. Those are the main culprits, friends. It's not that they'll hurt you eating it sometime, but if you break down and eat any of it all, you're going to think it's okay. All your corn chips and tater chips, I did loaded with that stuff. Now, you can find tater chips that don't have it. I've found them. You got to look pretty hard. I mean, the ones that say health food and healthy and gluten-free, they boil them in sunflower oil or safflower oil or canola oil. That stuff it ain't good for you, put it that way. Well, talking about that 10 square mile district in Washington, D.C., why did they do that? Well, we'd said in our course on nationalism, what is a nation? And international law has traditionally defined what a nation is. A nation has 3 things always, and if they don't have these 3 things, our country will not recognize anything as a nation unless it has these 3 things at a minimum. First, you got to have a bounded territory, bounded with a boundary. Why do you think that Joe Biden wants to just ignore the boundary of the United States? Because he hates our nation. He wants it to go away, and so do the useful idiots that work for him. It's that simple. If without a boundary, you don't have a nation. God said, I want there to be nations. The Bible does not promote tribalism. No, sir. Anarchy? No, sir. Lawlessness? No, sir. What does it promote? What does God say he wants? The sovereign lawgiver. He wants nations. Over and over and over. That point is made in the trust settlement of God, nations. He divided the land of the earth up among nations, divides it up. That means it has boundaries. Well, if a country doesn't have a bounded territory with clear lines, that means you have to guard it. There's no nation. Number two, in order to have our country to recognize another country as a nation, in order for other countries to recognize us as a nation, that have boundaries, and then we have to have a group of people within those boundaries that are all subject to the same body of law. The same body of law. Now, we're a common law country. We're subject to the same body of law all over the country. To varying degrees a little bit, but fundamentally, you say, oh yeah, we're all subject to the Constitution of the United States. No, we aren't. I'm not subject to the Constitution of the United States, and neither are you. It's the government of the United States that's subject to the Constitution. The Constitution was to limit the government, not me, not you. And same thing with your state constitutions. That's a thin slice of our common law tradition as applied to government. Well, there has to be a bounded territory of land, and there has to be people within that bounded territory subject to the laws that apply within that bounded territory. You got to have that. And if you don't have that, you don't have a nation. That's right. Well, if we're going to have a government of the United States, if we're going to have a government of the United States that's a sovereign, that is impossible without land. That's why that we have the District of Columbia. I don't hear people talking about that. They should. Why do we have the District of Columbia? Because America, the general government of the United States is a sovereign. They have to have a bounded territory to claim to be a sovereign nation. And they don't have one otherwise. And I want to use this analogy. It's an analogy. It's not the same thing, and I'm not for it. It's wrong that we've done this, but here's the truth. Here's what happened. During the Reagan presidency, he recognized the Vatican as a country. The Vatican. Why did he do that? It's a violation of the First Amendment, clearly, in my mind, but he did it. It had never been done before because we didn't want to do that. We're a Protestant nation. Protestantism, which is biblicism, we take the laws of nature, and the laws of nature's God as our fundamental volumes of law, have nothing to do with the civil canon laws of the Roman Church. So we didn't recognize that. We had a penchant against it. I think it's amazing how fast people forget what goes on in politics. But I remember distinctly how upset people were. I mean, really upset. Worried. When Jack Kennedy moved into the White House. He wasn't elected. The Democrats were doing the same thing then, or they're doing today. They were hijacking elections. And that's what happened. Why did they do that? Because the Vatican has always said, we're a sovereign nation. Well, we got an area of land here, and we're sovereign within this area of land. You see what the theory is? But that's not what Rome says. Rome says they're sovereign over all land of the earth. That's their official doctrine, but they said we're sovereign within here. And if you're a Romanist, and here's the way the argument went, your supreme loyalty is to the Pope of Rome, if you're serious about it. How could you have supreme loyalty to the Pope of Rome and that land over there in the Vatican when you live here in America? You can't have divided loyalty, clearly, in our common law tradition. It's a common sense question. The divided loyalty is no loyalty at all. Loyalty is an all or nothing matter. I'm loyal to my family. But there comes a conflict. I have a friend. I think he's listening right now. Fascinating story. He went head to head with the Protestant church where he attended, biblical church. His wife went haywire on him. Haywire. Doing things bad for the family. Judge told him, give your children to your wife right now. He knew the judge, small town. Said, Judge, I can't do that. He said, come on. If you don't do it, I'm going to have to throw you in jail. You know that? Well, you do what you got to do. I'm going to do what I got to do. I'm not doing that. I know better. I'm going to answer to God for it. That ain't going to work for me. Well, went to the newspapers. Where he went to church, they got embarrassed. People being lawless. They came to him and said, well, you got to do what they say. He said, no. Well, the church is very well organized properly. They had courts in their church. Hierarchy. And he went to trial over it, proved his case that he was right, they were wrong. And the church said, well, doesn't make any difference at this point. The court has spoken, that's the end of it. Nothing we can do about it. You got to do what they say or we're throwing your carcass out of the church. They call it excommunication, as you know. And that's what happened. So for many decades now, he'd been thrown out of the church he grew up in. He agrees with their doctrine, but he does not agree, and he had to make the choice. He does not agree with the doctrine that says that the church has authority over his family that trumps his. That's really what it came down to, and he's told me that. I'm so glad he did. Helped me understand a lot of things, but that, by analogy, you have the same problem. Who has final authority in any given jurisdiction? That's the ultimate question among humanity. It's a matter of jurisdiction. Does the government have authority over my family to direct the education of my children? Answer, no, 1,000 times no. No, I choose what I'm going to teach my children, not them. And they're teaching my children some serious, ugly stuff if I send them to their schools. I'm not going to do that. Lord help me. Does the government have authority to come into your house and take your firearms? No. Do they have authority inside your home? Answer, no. Except if they have a warrant on probable cause issued by a neutral and detached magistrate. That's violated 1,000 times in America every day, probably more. But they have no authority in your home. That's our common law tradition, often called the castle doctrine. The poorest man may in his cottage bid all defiance to the crown. It may be frail, its roof may shake. The storm may enter, the wind may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot enter. All of his force dare not cross the threshold of the ruined tenement. Every man is a king within his own house, no matter how humble. I mean, you could look at the walls and say, man, this place is so rackety and rickety, you could throw a cat through the wall or the roof. My granddad said when he used to go to sleep with his brothers upstairs in the house that my great-granddad built, things got real rough and real hard for them. They were tobacco farmers. But things got rough, and he said he'd lay at night in the wintertime and look up and count the stars through the holes in the roof. It didn't amount to much. But our law says to the government, you can't go in there unless you get invited or unless you have a authority. That's called warrant from a neutral and detached magistrate, particularly describing the place to be searched. And whatever it is you're looking there, evidence to be seized. Arrest of a man or evidence of a crime, that takes something to get that warrant. My point is, the government doesn't just have jurisdiction to come in, or even on your property within your curtilage. much less come in and take your children away from you. Well, it's a matter of jurisdiction. What is jurisdiction? The right to act respecting the given matter, and the Congress of the United States has all right to act respecting everything that goes on within that 10 square miles we call Washington, D.C. My granddaughter said to me yesterday, "What'd you say?" I said, "Washington, D.C." She said, "There's no R in Washington." Oh, I said, "There is when I say it." She said, "Why do you say it that way?" I said, "Because that's the way my mother says it." Something wrong with what Grandma's doing? Well, no, I guess not. Or it'd be her great-grandma, I guess. She says Washington. Everybody I know says Washington. Around here, why is that? It happened because of the great shift. The great shift between John Wycliffe in the 14th century in the English tongue and William Shakespeare, John Wycliffe and Geoffrey Chaucer. Fascinating shift. You know, no linguist has ever figured out why that shift happened exactly. There are a lot of good theories. I've read some of them. But it's Washington to me. Well, that's pretty good. Thanks, I appreciate that. It's very helpful. Well, 9:45. Washington, D.C., this is an important subject. In order to have a sovereign, there must be land. Do you see that now, what I'm saying? There must be land. Why? Because God said, that's why. The Bible says there are no nations, there are no sovereign governments. Governments have to have land and a people within a bounded area of that land over which the law that governs everybody within that bounded area is enforced. A common land, a common people, a common law. That's what the Bible says. And so when those who put our common law tradition down to paper, which had never been done like this, when they knew what had to be done because of our common law tradition, which is also consonant with the Bible, they said, well, can't have a sovereign government without land, so we got to give them some land. So they gave them some land, 10 square miles. It wasn't a circle either. It was not a circle like the Vatican. See, the Vatican has always claimed to be sovereign. The Pope, his word is final. There is no appeal from what he says, according to them. How, friends, neighbors, and kin, how can we possibly understand who we are if we don't know where we came from? And how can we know where we came from if we don't look into our past? And Rome is the Western expression of Babylon. And if you don't know how that impacted not only the continent of Europe, but the nation of England, you don't even know why we're here in America. So when I talk about these things, those of you that are Romanist, don't be offended. I talk about history. The history of Christianity in the West, and especially in Britain, has been a study of mine for over 4 decades now. Pretty intense study. I try to stick to the fundamentals. But what I tell you because those of you that grew up as Romanists, we share a common history. I don't know where, but somewhere back there, I'm sure that the tyranny of Babylon through the Church of Rome had power over my ancestors. I don't know where. I don't even know. I mean, I can't go much further, as I've said. Well, recently I can go further back than the graveyard down there at Mount Church when folk first came into this neck of the woods, and my family are buried there on both sides, by the way. It's a small world. I was thinking this morning about this lawyer I used to do cases with. We were very close. His name was Lewis Stanton Dotson. Lewis Stanton. I thought, that's odd. He was named after Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War. Well, I mean, I knew him pretty well. Well, the reason he was named after Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War, Lewis Stanton, because he was grandson to Abraham Lincoln's Secretary of War. He's gone now. One time we were driving down, we did cases together. He was older than me. I believe he was born in 1938. Everybody called him Stan. His grandfather on his mother's side was Assistant Secretary of the Navy. He was a hardcore Republican. Assistant Secretary of the Navy, yeah. He loved politics and active in the party, hardcore, of course, Republican, but no, he didn't like his grandpa. Nobody in his family liked his grandpa, who was Secretary of War under Abraham Lincoln, said he was a brutal and out-of-control man. That's what they said. He told me that. He didn't know him, but he knew people in his family that did know him, that hadn't known him. You know, Abe Lincoln first met Lewis Stanton in the McCormick Reaper case out of Chicago, and it was tried in Cincinnati. The McCormick Reaper Company was the largest manufacturer in America for years. I mean, they got so huge, even in the early days, they started making those reapers, you know. Reaping machine, that revolutionized all agriculture all over the world. Before that, people were mowing down wheat and grain with a scythe by hand. They get 100 men standing in a row at the edge of the field, and they just start working her down. But then people had to come behind and put it up in shocks, and then they had to beat the grain out of it with, get this, they called them, in the Bible, they're called tribulos. And Paul the Apostle uses the tribulo as an example. Well, we call it tribulation. The word tribulo in the Greek New Testament, it's a Greek word, it's called translated tribulation. One old preacher, I heard him say one time, if God says you're going to have tribulation, and he says God's people will have tribulation. He said, if you're going to have tribulation, God says you're going to have tribulation, then it's about time we start tribulating. Of course, I thought at the time, okay, how do I tribulate? I don't know, maybe I start shaking. I didn't know what it meant. But anyway, I found out since that a tribulo was a long pole with a piece of wood on the end attached with a couple of pieces of leather attached to the long pole, and it would flop, and that's what men used to beat the grain out of the stalks on the threshing floor. Just beat that stuff half to death, and of course get all the grain out, and then you get rid of the chaff and sweep up the grain. That was called tribulo, and that's what God says he does to his people. He brings tribulation. We're going through that in the book of Peter on Sundays. Yesterday. No, Saturdays. Book of Peter is about how you're to react to tribulation, to hardship, to suffering. That's what the book of 1 Peter is about. Join us on Saturday. We're breaking it down clause by clause and blow by blow. How important can that be? Very important. Don't tell me you don't have tribulation. Question is, how are you tribulating? What is your reaction to hardship, suffering? God tells us how we are to react. And if you've been around very long and you're a Christian, don't tell me you haven't had tribulation. If you haven't had tribulation, that tells me that's a bad sign. That's a bad sign, because God's people get tribulation. Be not amazed, said Jesus Christ. I'm quoting. Be not amazed if the world hates you. They hate you, he said, because they hate me. And further, he said, they hate you because I have chosen you out. I have the Greek word eklektos, elect. I have chosen you out from everybody else in the world, and they hate you for it. Boy, have I seen that. Takes a long time to come to grips with it. Hurts your feelings at first, but it helps to know why that's true. And then it further helps to know, what am I supposed to do? If you don't know from God's book what you're supposed to do, it's going to be even harder on you. I'm going to stop it. No. Vengeance, no. Retaliation, maybe, maybe not. It'll tell you. It tells you in 1 Peter. James tells us that too, another book in the New Testament that talks about that a lot. Well, they got this 10 square miles over which they have sovereign authority. And that and what we call federal enclaves, military bases, etc., federal courthouses, they have sovereign authority on their property. Constitution of the United States gives Congress that authority. Congress is the sole lawmaker and controller of that area. They set up the governments they want to set up there, and they've done that. They've said, well, we authorize a mayor in Washington, D.C., so they got that. None of the states have any authority or control within that 10 square miles. Why did they do that? Again, because there is no sovereignty in God's understanding, God's government, in our common law tradition. According to the Bible, there is no sovereign government without land, and there it is. Well, 143, has this district no legislature of its own choice, as states has? States have legislatures of their own choice. This district does not. Listen to me. This District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., has no legislature of its own choice. No. The states send representatives, and those representatives that the states send have absolute power over everybody within that 10 square miles. That's different. That's very different, isn't it? Answer. No question, 144. Is Washington, D.C. a part of any state? Answer. No. It consists of territory. Territory, what's territory? That's the same Latin root word as terror. Territory is the same Latin root word as terror. Where do we get the word terror? Well, terror is a Latin word, and the territory is the land area over which a city in the ancient world extended its terror. And without a city in the Babylonian system of government, which covers the whole world except the common law countries, they can't do their government without cities. And from the cities, the terror of the long arm of the law of the city extends over the country folk. That's what's happening in California right now, Texas, New York, Massachusetts, Illinois, and to varying degrees, Indiana, some, but not as much. You've heard me say this before. I'll say it again. On a clear day in the state of Illinois, over half of the voters in the state can see the Sears Tower, arguably the largest building, the tallest building in the world. That has political ramifications. And the city of Chicago seeks to extend its terror over the territory of that vast, massive agricultural, coal-producing, oil and gas-producing state, and stifles the productivity of the state. Happening in California, Nevada. Nevada is a mining, ranching state. The ranches are pretty near all wiped out now. Same things happening in other states, yeah. Well, it consists of territory, that is Washington, D.C., which the states have given up for the express purpose that it might be the seat of the general government of our nation. General government, he said. The territory at present used for this purpose is called the District of Columbia and has been ceded, that is, given up, by the states of Maryland and Virginia, within which it before lay. That area, that 10 square miles, is on the border of the state of Virginia and Maryland, and they each gave up a land so that 10 square miles could be put there. Question number 45. Is there any other place in the United States which is thus ruled by Congress alone? Answer. Yes. Listen, I'd mentioned this. All forts, United States military forts, all United States military magazines, that is places where powder and explosive and other things are laid up. All arsenals, as places where explosives and ammunition and buildings and arms, firearms are kept. Dockyards, that is places where vessels of war are built and maintained and docked. Navy yards, they call them, which belong to the United States. These are governed not by the legislatures of the states where they are, in which they may be, but by the general government in Washington, D.C. Do you notice? It doesn't say the federal government. Back then in 1828, when this catechism was written, it's called the general government. We need to call it that now. Do not call it the federal government. Federal means head, the head government. It's not. It's the general government. Very limited powers, limited only to the powers our Constitution expresses. And all those powers have to apply generally. That means equally. This government in Washington, D.C. has no authority to favor this religious group, this people that have a different color of skin, this people that are sex perverts or not sex perverts or whatever. It's general. It has to apply. What they do has to apply to everybody the same. That's what the word general means. Question 146. What other power is conferred by the Constitution upon the Congress of the United States? It says a general authority. Here it is, quote, from the Constitution to make all laws which shall be necessary and proper for carrying into execution the foregoing powers. That's called the necessary and proper clause. This is Brent Allen Winters, commonlawyer.com, www.commonlawyer.com, commonlawyer.com.